In 1995, a Formula V was introduced that pushed the boundaries of development in the category. It was a rare moment as the car was obviously different from the rest, legal and revolutionary. This is the story of the Tasman 95 Formula V and the Tasman Formula Vs.
There's been over time. There's been a couple of questions asked of Tasman V and where they come from, what is it, and leading into the Tasman 95, which is the last V built, and why isn't it seen racing with its contemporaries? To tell the story, it goes back to mid 1970s, I should say, where Ray Bromley and Ray Gould, the two of Rays, built a beautiful looking Formula V, and it was really well engineered. Ray Bromley was from Tasmania, and the car was called a Tasman. This car, circa 1978, Dad John bought it, and all during a time when he was still very heavily involved in Formula V and the running of it in the background, and in turn working with the South African Scrutineers Association and helping them, or being part of establishing it into a much bigger forum. The car was raced and or driven by Dad and the three brothers. Us three brothers, we didn't all treat it as with the respect it should have been treated. Its life sadly ended with myself turning the car over in Leeuwkop in an accident mixed up with a hay bale. Going back in the story of Formula V, from the outset of it, it was always a great place for your average guy to build a racing car with his mates around some guidelines and with a few must-be's on the whole thing. But what it was always doing, right from the beginning with the Americans, ingenuity was the way. People were trying mechanical ideas, design ideas, aerodynamic ideas, and making little racing cars that, whether they were good, bad, or indifferent, they were all evolutions of something. And making a car from nothing but an idea, and in many cases, because it was the only way to go racing, that's what led to people joining the Formula V ranks. I think very few Formula V drivers wanted anything more than to stay in Formula V forever. Everybody wanted to go and drive the bigger and better race cars, but economics didn't allow for that. And it really grew a band of brothers as such, or brothers and sisters. There was a mix of people involved. Within the designs of cars and so on, there were a lot of very clever people involved over time. So you had, as you've seen before, Ken Gillibrand trying ground effect aerodynamics, in the 70s, and we had people making thin cars, narrow little cars, flat cars, lay down cars. We even had bizarre stuff like the nose cone that was made of wire mesh so that it didn't have frontal area in inverted commas. The air could blow through the car. Did that work? Didn't they work? Well, it's all part of the game of ingenuity and creativity within the guidelines that were given. That which leads further to the first Tasman and how the name, why the name. And so Ray Bromley being from Tasmania, guess what he called it. When I'd smashed the other Dad's car up, and it was very regrettable. It was horrible. Went on to start making my own next one because there was no other racing car, and I took ideas from some ideas from the Harrier, which is a car Peter and my brother and Mike Frankel built, and they raced very successfully into South African champions. Furthermore, there was influence from absolute dear friend Dennis Temple, who was very well renowned in Formula Ford racing as a driver, constructor, designer, unbelievable engineer. The first car came together. It was using my ideas and ideas I'd seen, but it was the first Formula V with a pushrod rear suspension, inboard shocks and springs with a Z bar. Peter's Harrier, he went for a pull rod system on it. And all of our influences definitely came from Dennis and from the Formula Fords and bigger cars. So that set the scene for my first Tasman. And I retained the name of it because it was A, a nice name, and B, to have some follow through within the category of the Tasman. I had a lot of success with that car. I had a lot of structural testing with the designs of those cars leading onto different 1988. That was when I then built my second and completely different design would be the better way. And that was the Tasman 90 to be ready for the 1989 season. And tongue-in-cheek between myself and Charlie Flea and Dad, we were the team, and we had Mike McMaster helping out. We tongue-in-cheek called it the 90 because it was a year ahead of its time. It had quite a lot of evolution in it, new ideas. It was the first car that we were allowed to put inboard front shock absorbers. So it had push rods operating the rear, the front shock absorbers. I took good ideas from the Americans, utilizing single trailing arms to the rear of the gearbox. But more than that is that I then turned the gearbox into a complete stressed member. So the suspension, which was a pull rod setup with its Z bar and trailing arms, everything was attached to the gearbox, and it in turn was held onto the back of the car by 6 bolts, 4 onto the engine, 2 onto the chassis. To change the gearbox, to change a clutch, it was a matter of 6 bolts, very, very quick to do, and off we went. There weren't other cars doing that at the time. People were doing different things and chassis going all over the place, but it was everybody's choice, design, idea. That car proved to be pretty effective with all the good racing that was going on during the course of the 1989 season. Ken Janish, and we're in collusion with the Formula V Association, the whole technical committee, were looking into bringing in the use of the Golf engine. And it was predominantly around having a more contemporary engine, spares available, and that Volkswagen would help out. It was great. It led to a lot of different design, but within people that were involved in evolutions of things, we had Terry Stidworthy leading it out, as it were. My dad, John Koenig, Ken Janish, whose Caldwell was the mule car. Dave Kokomo, who was a committee member and built his own Formula V as well, and racer. We had Harvey Coase involved, Dave Pepper, his son Ian Pepper, and then you had Willie Lombard, and we made use of his machining skills in making flywheels and adapter plates and so on. So in essence, it was a lot of people involved in getting this thing to work. But during our transition, as it were, there was Heel Hutton, a real character of a guy, but he was pursuing an alternative engine, being the Nissan 1400, which he put into his Impala V. And he had some problems getting it going, but in the end, the constant was to stick with Volkswagen and go for the Golf engine. Again, the category was evolving and allowing people creativity to make what they want to make within the guidelines. At the end of the 89 season, I converted my car, altered the rear of it, of the Tasman 90. We put radiators onto it as we needed because we were going water-cooled engines. Among my ideas was to use the radiators for a little bit of, try and achieve some little bit of downforce out of the things, some benefit to it other than cooling. And at the end, it didn't not work. Our ideas, whether they were cockamamie ideas or not, we all tried things. And as an association, everything was so well received as long as you were in play. I digress slightly because of the evolution of my first Tasman to the others. roll bar broke off in the accident. And when I built the next car, I was adamant I'm not having a single roll hoop, I'm putting two, with the idea from the Reynard, actually, Formula Ford. That was its own story in bringing that into it, in the pyramid style roll bar. So again, an evolution which was a safety one, but you could also use that as a key point in beefing up the chassis and so on. Into the Tasman 90 water-cooled engine within our game of trying to get things working and working with the association, making it happen. I had some input from Eddie Pinto, who was the Formula One guru of our country. We had Robert Pica, and he was part of the association and he's an engineer. He also had input into the transition and changeover engine. We utilized Ken Janish's dad for machining parts too. There was groups of people helping to make things work, make the category go forward all the time, from the beginning, from day one. I raced the Tasman 90, had a very good association with Rally Wax. We kept going. I then sold that car, went on to build the Tasman 92, which was now using another different idea of having the radiator in a different place. Single radiator. It was mounted under the knees to an inboard pushrod suspension on the front. It was looked quite sleek and trim. It was a forerunner in the respect of retained the gearbox being a total stress member, and it had an aluminium adapter plate, which initially was looked and kind of questioned, is it going to be strong enough? But on the basis of Formula Fords do it, so why not Formula V's? That's it. Secondary is that I worked as a design of the thing. The gearbox could come off the back of the car. Again, just 6 bolts, 2 into the chassis for joining the engine, which made life so much quicker for the various changes that we need to do. Car went through an evolution of trials and changes to see if we could make it better, worse, what have you. And then had the opportunity through Rally Wax to put that car into the CSR wind tunnel. And I arrived there quite full of myself that this is the sleekest thing in the world, with a pile of cardboard and tank tape. And anyway, we went and spent a day fiddling and trying things under the guidance of some very, very, very intelligent people and guys that had been involved in work with the 40 Formula One team. We came out of that with a whole lot of ideas, but there was only a one-off. There was no chance, there was no means, there was no nothing to go and do it a second time. The valued thing is I had photographs and I had a video. So it gave me an idea, and in turn there was advice and guidance. And all of this led into the evolution of the next car, Tasman 95. Obviously, the working 92 being the year, 95 being the year. And Tasman 95 was built. Again, a lot of what we'd seen in the wind tunnel and things that I'd thought of possibly to remedy problems that we'd seen in the 92 were built into the 95, along with suspension evolutions, following trends really, because in suspension in Formula V, it's based on a Beetle front end and a Beetle gearbox, a swing arm. Over time from the beginning, whether it be in South Africa, whether it be Europe or America, there were evolutions of 2 shocks and springs, or 2 dampers and springs supporting the car. There had been transverse leaf spring systems. There were shock absorbers and Z bars to control the wheels, the left and the right, to keep them on the ground. And what Ken Janish brought into this country was a zero roll, which was a mechanical way of linking the front to the left to the right via 2 shock absorbers or one, and a set of either push rod, pull rod, or rockers. That was a pretty effective way of doing it. Has been proven worldwide. So the South Africans, we cottoned onto what Kenny had brought back when he showed us what he'd done. Unbelievably generous to share information like this. Anyway, the car was built. It had its evolutions of shape that we thought was better. It had chassis design, which I hoped was better. Certainly was building, kept on building a bit of strength in. We then got into suspension shapes and designs, and what I got onto that car was using two rear shock absorbers, not a single one, a pull rod system, much along the lines of a pull rod and a rocker, along the lines of what we'd done on other cars. And everything was within the bounds of regulation and guidelines, which is great. And I went on to race that car for many, many years, for tens of years actually. It was, again, with people in Formula V's, or were trying things out, is that we had such interesting designs come along. We had one chap who, trying to get the center of gravity down, he put his engine and gearbox at such an angle that there was no oil up in the top of the gearbox where the gear ratios were, and things like that. And it was ideas. You've got to give the guys their due, and everybody championed them. I raced the car. Uh, it's been pretty successful. Has raced in in another category of racing as well in its time. The question asked, why hasn't it been seen in the last few years in its own contemporary class it was designed and built for? I think I have answered the question in what I've said.